The Plow at Eaves being the collective noun for some muddy fields just outside Woodplumpton, slumbers sedately down the appropriately named Eaves Lane, where it reckons with a certain amount of smugness that it's the oldest pub in Lancashire. It was built in 1625, so it might have a point. For anybody who wants to argue the toss, the Plow is now owned by Thwaites' Brewery. That's the plough as in the pub, not the redundant farm implement that can be found in the car park. Get in touch with them about it if you're that way inclined, because I couldn't be bothered either way. Long ago it was known as the Cheadle Plough Inn. We don't know why. Cheadle's miles away in Manchester or somewhere. At another time it was known as the Plough at Cuddy Hill, or after several pints, just the Cuddy Pub. Where the hill's gone nowadays is anybody's guess, because the surrounding farmland is flatter than Sir Keir Starmer's head. There was a battle on the ironically named hill in 1546. The Plough now stands on the deserted battlefield. Jeannie Mackintosh said it was hard to believe there was ever a battle here at all. Well, you know, it has been 600 bloody years. Just over a century after the pre-pub brawl, in 1648 to be precise, the Plough played refuge to both Republicans and Royalists during the English Civil War, because no matter what their political leanings, Lancastrians have always enjoyed getting bladdered. So did Cromwell, it seems, who, if public relations and folk tales are to be believed, spent most of his time when he wasn't killing cavaliers laid flat out underneath the nearest pub table. Another inn with a history of violent political clashes, or one violent political clash at any rate, is the Burley Arms at the not so very far away Brinning. Until recent times it was known to the locals as the Red Hart or the Bloody Pluck, depending on how many pints they'd drunk. Named after a skirmish in which a Roundhead cut out the heart of a royalist he was having a scrap with and, using his dagger, nailed it up above the door. The late Headley Lawrenson had a slightly different etymological explanation behind the Bloody Pluck, which ran,
"After a great battle, the intestines of a prince were hung on a thorn bush as a trophy and a warning to others."
It saves on expensive Christmas decorations, I suppose. Whichever story is more accurate, it puts the fights that I witnessed in the Buccaneer at Skipool in my younger drinking days to shame. Now then, just bear with us for the next bit. You've heard of the Great Train Robbery, right, where 2.6 million quid, the equivalent of 58 million quid, or 3 of Elton John's wigs nowadays, was stolen from the Royal Mail train in 1963? Of course you have. Well, there were 17 members of the gang in total, all working under the enigmatic Ulsterman, who many have claimed, although it's never been proven, was a certain Patrick McKenna, a postal worker from Salford. Patrick himself died in poverty, and the bulk of the money was never recovered. Which brings us back to Woodplumpton, in case you were wondering where this was going. Even today, rumour persists that a large portion of the money is buried beneath the wood adjoining Moon's farm. Said wood is accessible, or at least the outskirts of it is, via the canal towpath, but we didn't bother taking a look because we were tired of getting covered in mud. Unfortunately, perhaps, the wood is also privately owned, so whatever you do, don't turn up with shovels and high hopes, because you'll end up being arrested. Up the road from Moon's Bridge stands Hollow Forth Hall, another private property, which is why we couldn't get any decent shots of it. They like peacocks at Hollow Forth Hall. Back in the days when we used to moor our narrowboat in the area, they'd keep us awake all bloody night, screeching in the darkness like Yoko Ono gargling battery acid. It's hard to say exactly how old the building is, being it an eclectic mix of Jacobean, Tudor, Edwardian, Georgian and Victorian styles. But Hollow Forth Hall is a Grade 2 listed building, and Hollow Forth itself was first documented as being owned by Robert de Holland in 1292. One of the reasons why it's so difficult to date various aspects of the building with any accuracy is because its owner, during the 19th century, a certain Henry Threlfall, was an avid collector of other people's antiquities stroke building supplies. For example, Preston Market Cross, originally erected in Preston Marketplace in 1782, somehow found itself in 1858 acting as a hollow fourth hall gatepost, where it remained until 1979, when it was returned for unspecified reasons to Preston. Other intriguing, potentially incongruous collectibles, most of which we couldn't see from the road but we've read about in local history books, included carved saint heads and corbels from the parish church when it was demolished, a mullioned window, a sundial, ornate pinnacles, it's best to ask your doctor about them, a Roman soldier's head, don't ask, I honestly don't know, a sarcophagus, and the upper section of the Headless Cross of Anderton, which we've mentioned before in a previous episode, so we don't have to go into any further detail here. Suffice it to say that the upper and lower halves of the Anderton Cross were separated during the Reformation. The upper section is now housed in the Harris Museum. Enough said. Speaking of underwhelming crosses, back up the road and over the canal a bit, give or take the odd junction, stands the Stump Cross, or at least the base of it does. It was almost certainly a Norse cross base originally, hewn from a single slab of stone, probably belonging to an ancient keel. There's a plaque attached to it, which informs us that the base was discovered during excavations in 1931, although what sort of excavations the plaque doesn't say. It now gives its name to the locality. The cross itself is relatively modern and fittingly stumpy. All matters considered, the proper cross shaft is probably the gatepost that holds up the gate to the field next door. Possibly. Okay, enough. Please click like, subscribe and or leave an unoffensive comment, because YouTube's algorithms clearly need a good kick up the backside. We're getting less views here than Edwina Curry's homemade erotic videos. And don't forget to join us again very soon for another pointless episode of Lancashire Footnotes.